And so we say to our white brothers and sisters, don't tap into the guilt of perhaps your ancestors owning slaves. Tap into your ancestry of the abolitionist who stood up for what's right.
People always try to justify somebody's death. And even in my son's case, they try to justify their death. And I keep telling people, this is not about black and white. It's not all the time about black and white, but we got to just focus on what's right and what's wrong. And that was wrong to see that.
I'd like to divide racism from injustice because they're often used interchangeably, but they're really not the same thing. Racism is a condition of the heart. It deals with how you feel about me. Injustice is an action, it's how you act toward me.
Oftentimes I want to operate out of my ego. I want to operate out of my hurt, my pain, but it's God's love for me that he forgives me every day, and I fall short every day. So with that being said, I try to operate out of that same love, and it's hard. It's extremely hard, especially when you're hurting, especially when your dad never recovers the same from that night.
But this is not a black thing. This is a human thing. And so we have to have humanity.
I challenge anybody to say, that's not worth fighting for. I challenge anybody to say, that's not what makes America great. I challenge anybody to say, that's not what makes America the great beacon of hope and justice for all of the world to marvel.
Even though the headlines will say, black musician converts 50 Klan members, 200 Klan members, or whatever they say, no, I did not convert those people. I am the impetus for over 200 white supremacists getting out of those organizations. But what I do is I plant a seed and I nourish that seed, and they end up converting themselves.
Every modality on the planet we need to use. When the public hears and acts, as I said, ability and will creates action that we perhaps have never seen in our lives thus far. This is the time we must act, and we will act. That's who we are as a nation.
Hello, everyone. We join you with heavy hearts today, as I know so many of you have. After the loss of a dear brother, and the whole world saw it, witnessed it. They witnessed the murder. It's undeniable what happened. And the only beauty that I can find is that people of all colors, of all races, of all religions, of all backgrounds, all over the world have rallied forth to not let this time pass and to make sure that we create not only some healing here, but some real change. And often I talk to people about change, and change is automatic actually. You don't have to work on change. Change is going to occur. Our bodies are going to change. The world's going to change. Our environment's going to change. Our families are going to change. Everything's going to change as time goes by. Change is automatic, but progress is not. And so this is a conversation today to see if we can't create some progress. And I'm so privileged. I was feeling so much pain for our brothers and sisters and thinking, what can I do? I'm just one voice, a white man. But I'm fortunate to have some beautiful friends that are great leaders. They're conscious leaders. They're people who are passionate and focused on true justice, but also are heartfelt in their approach. Our hope is to have them share their experience of what this is all about, what they want all of us to know who maybe not have these experiences, to not only know, but to appreciate. And most importantly, to call, what can we do to make real progress? What can we do to make lasting change that truly matters and change the quality of life and ends this nightmare that's been going on for more than decades, for centuries plus, for African Americans and for others of different races and different colors and different creeds and different backgrounds and different religions. It's really about not pointing fingers here. It's really about what can we do to bring back unity and love and compassion and connection to one another, and what can we do to move forward?
The tragedy of the killing of George Floyd is real in a different kind of way, because we have all saw the documentary of his death, literally narrated by him. He is begging. He's saying, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. What really needed to happen was they needed to give him a breath. He needed a breath, and he would have lived. And so I'm asking everybody, and along with George's family, Let's take a breath. Let's take a breath for peace, for justice, and let's take a breath to try to heal our country. America needs a breath too, because none of us can breathe after watching that video.
And stacking on the Eric Garners of the world, the Michael Browns, the Breonna Taylor, people coming in and shooting in her own bed. I mean, it's total insanity.
And Tony, thank you for saying Breonna Taylor's name. Today is her birthday. She would have been 7 years old. And so thank you so much for not letting her name get lost in this conversation.
And thank you for all those that you've defended and put your life on the line for, and for your courage, brother. You're a truly amazing man, and we all have enormous respect for you as a man, as a lawyer, and as a soul. Let's step into Martin Luther King III.
I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
Martin, your father talked about his dream, over half a century ago. But I'd like to hear from you. Where do you see we are, and how are we doing on your father's dream, and what has to change from your perspective? I'd love to hear.
This is an opportune moment for the United States of America. 52 years ago, Black men had signs in Memphis shortly before Dad was killed, saying, "I am a man." All they were asking was, treat us with dignity and respect and like human beings. 52 years later, Black people and white people and Latino and Hispanic people and others are standing with signs that say, Black Lives Matter. Again, requesting dignity and respect and treating people like human beings. We know that we are a much better nation than the behavior we're exhibiting. Yes, we've seen a lot of violence during this period, or some violence, I should say. Overwhelmingly, we've seen nonviolent demonstrators. Dad said that violence is the language of the unheard, which means that he never condoned violence, but he understood, as I think many do around the nation and the world, the conditions that have caused this. But yes, we can and will be better, because not only are the eyes of people all over the world on us, they are with us. Now, soon we will have to discuss the notion, where do we go from here? Dad's last book was titled, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community? We are obviously in the midst of chaos. And this condition has created that level of consciousness, I believe, like none before it. But the system has to be changed at its core. Diversity, sensitivity, human relations, training is needed from kindergarten through college. That would create on its own a different human being, maybe a different police officer. I mean, I remember when we used to apprehend suspects without even doing harm to them. Dad and his team and others adopted and worked to help create public policy. That's why we had a Civil Rights Act in '64, a Voting Rights Act in '65, fair housing legislation in '68. So there needs to be policy, new policy presented. And as I said, Congress is presenting that policy that directly addresses police misconduct and brutality. And I think the way we help is we need to be inundating our congresspersons, our senators, our president with emails, with text, and even the new TikTok, whatever the videos are the kids are using now. Every modality on the planet we need to use. When the public hears and acts, as I said, ability and will creates action that we perhaps have never seen in our lives thus far. This is the time we must act, and we will act. That's who we are as a nation.
So I think everybody in this room, everybody in this Zoom room who's of African-American descent had had similar experiences. I could go on and on and on about my own. We weren't human beings. So that particular narrative became insidiously within the culture. With a mass incarceration, the criminal justice system meting out different forms of justice, people are just suffering from fatigue. When the protests are also an element of anger and rage, but also just fatigue of the years of the insidious racism and bigotry. Now, I agree with Doc Rivers' dad. We're not here to be victims. We may be victimized, but we're not embracing victimhood. And so we learn to love and appreciate ourselves, develop a great sense of who we are. Now, what I'm heartened by is this particular protest does carry not only every race in the streets. We have our white brothers and sisters, our Asian brothers and sisters who, suffered from, the camps back in the day, Japanese internment camps, every Latino brothers and sisters, Black brothers and sisters, the gay brothers and sisters. Everybody has their own level of oppression, but we're all in the streets together. And our white brothers and sisters are now hearing and saying, wow, this is systemic. This is endemic. This has been going on a long time. Something must change, because Black people are not going to deconstruct racism. It's going to be white people and Black people and all of us together that deconstructs it. So they're beginning to have a conversation about white privilege, how to teach their children about what it is. So there's a level of sensitivity around what African Americans, Mexicans, some Asians, go through on a regular basis. And so we say to our white brothers and sisters, don't tap into the guilt of perhaps your ancestors owning slaves. Tap into your ancestry of the abolitionist who stood up for what's right. Tap into that ancestry. I'm sure you can find an ancestor somewhere that was an abolitionist that said, justice is for all. Begin to tap into that frequency and begin to, bring forth that dynamic of enough is enough, and begin to cultivate what is called compassion. Compassion is the highest. Compassion is the understanding of the lack of understanding. It's walking in another person's shoes. And so, there's two conversations. There's a conversation I have with Black people that say you're not to see yourself as a victim. You are to go deep in doing your inner work to heal your scar tissue, your wounds. And to the white people, I say the conversation for you is compassion, and to have an understanding of what people have gone through, so that you're not turning a blind eye. So, history is in the making right now. Are we a part of making it, or are we bystanders watching it? So I'm heartened. So I think this is a powerful moment, Tony, that the conversation that you're providing for us today is a beginning, but now we have to have a vision. We have to be able to articulate what does, on the local level, what does real policing look like? What does the justice system look like? Hey, what does healthcare look like? We have a sick care system, not a healthcare system. We have to begin to provide the vision and then strategy to move in that direction, and then implementation. And as I like to say, everybody can't do everything, but everybody can do something. That we have to figure out, what is it that's ours to do? Some people, what's theirs to do is to be on the streets right now. We have to ask ourselves, what is it that's mine to do?
It's about unity. And when I try to figure out the solution, I think there's some pragmatic ones when you talk about, like, barring chokeholds. It's pretty freaking obvious. You know anything about martial arts, you know how sensitive this area is, how easy even someone without bad intent could harm someone, right? Much less somebody who's pumped up in testosterone and anger and rage and whatever else is going on inside that mind. But there's certainly things that we can do, and we want to talk about those. But what do you think has allowed you to be such a unifier? I look around this virtual room here, and we have people that have experienced so much pain, but somehow they didn't let the pain stop them. They didn't let rage stop them. They converted it into drive to do something good. From Martin Luther King to Daryl to every person on this group, Laura. So what do you think has made you a unifier? And what, when I try to find the ultimate answer, there's the systemic pieces that have to be done. But to me, the ultimate answer is unity. The ultimate answer, that's another word for just love. When we have love, we treat each other so radically different. It doesn't matter how people behaved in the past or experienced, their color of skin or any of those things. So what has made you a unifier, and what can make us unify?
You're dealing with our deep spiritual nature. That regardless of your religion, when you get to the practices of every religion, you're going to bump into forgiveness and you're going to bump into love. And we have to begin to cultivate both of that. We have to begin to forgive. And forgiveness does not mean condoning an act or letting people off the hook. All forgiveness is self-forgiveness, meaning you have to let go of the resentment and the animosity within your own soul so that you have a clear availability to wisdom and guidance and direction. And then you have to cultivate a heart as big as the world so that you're embracing. It was Howard Thurman that said it is impossible to love humanity in general. You can only love humanity in particular. To say I love humanity doesn't mean anything. It's just, that's a generalization, that's abstract. You have to love the person you're with. So unity is a good word, union is a good word, but it all has to be steeped in unconditional love. You have to have an encounter with your soul, and then you begin to see differently. You begin to see that we're all made directly from the source of all creation, the presence of God. And I don't mean a magical man in the sky. I'm talking about the presence that's never an absence, the presence of love and beauty and intelligence that birthed us all. And if we do, we'll create a kind and just global society. Why? Because we will be kind and just individuals.
And we'll all experience the spiritual love and joy that brings that you can't have any other way. And I think all of us in this room have that common understanding that we have to have something to serve more than ourselves. And that's where I think love comes from. It's not just an internal experience of getting what you want. It's an experience of a life of meaning. And a life of meaning comes when we understand for things to change, we've got to change. For things to get better, we've got to get better. It's not somewhere outside of ourselves. We have Sabrina Fulton, who experienced what no human should have to go through, much less any mom, the loss of her 17-year-old son, Trayvon Martin, and again, a person who have every right to live in rage. And I'm sure she's got to have some of that, but she wrote a life about her son's life and what the an enduring life would be, if you're resting in power. And I just want to hear from you. The part, it's all heartbreaking, but George Floyd, the part when, that was already mentioned, when he was calling out for his mama, at the end, they're going to take me, they're going to kill me, mama. I don't think anybody's got a soul that couldn't have their heart be crushed by that. But for you, it's even more direct because you've directly experienced that. So what's your perspective as a mom, about what's going on here and what's happened to George Floyd, what happened to your son? And please tell us what your experience has been and what gives you hope, if anything, to create change, because I know you're dedicated to that.
When I watched the video of George Floyd, and he called out for his mother, it hit me differently from probably the average person. The average mom who listened to that, it definitely cuts like a knife. I mean, it just tugs at the strings of your heart just to hear somebody to call out for their mother, because when you get in a jam or you feel like you're slipping away, and he probably felt like his life was slipping away, and he probably knew that he was going to die. You either call Jesus or you call your mother. A lot of times we feel like if we just comply that we'll be able to make it home safely. Well, some of these people have been compliant and they still don't make it home safely. And so that's some of the things that we need to focus on, the times where they don't make it home safely, because you can have your hands up, you can obey commands, and you can do everything to comply with whatever the police officer is saying, and you still maybe get shot and killed. People always try to justify somebody's death. And even in my son's case, they try to justify their death. And I keep telling people, this is not about black and white. It's not all the time about black and white, but we got to just focus on what's right and what's wrong. And that was wrong to see that. And then I tell people who try to challenge me about certain things, I tell those people, well, what if it was your husband? What if it was your brother? What if it was your son? What if it was, you think about, put your family member, your loved one in George Floyd's place. How would you feel? I think what's happening now is African Americans usually talk to other African Americans, and we are talking to each other. We're preaching to the choir. We already know what we have to experience. We already know what our sons and daughters have to experience. But now it's other people that are able to see what we have been experiencing. And I think through that video, it kind of changed mindsets. And that's something that that's very necessary that we have to do. We got to change mindsets. We got to open up people's mind, and we can't just talk amongst ourselves about what we're experiencing. We have to talk to other people about what we're experiencing. People are never going to, they're never going to feel what we feel as African Americans, but you certainly can be compassionate. You can certainly support us based on what you saw. And so I know it's not going to change the world. I know it's not going to miraculously, change somebody's life and, oh, I'm changed forever. But at least we see progress with them standing together with us joining forces with other nationalities, other countries. People really didn't believe what was going on here in the United States. Look what happened in Brunswick, Georgia with Ahmaud Arbery. Those 3 guys, after he was dead on the ground, they went home and got in their beds. Nothing happened to them for months until we started protesting, until we started speaking out, until we started making comments and causing a few problems. Okay, now they're arrested. Then the same thing happened with Breonna Taylor, who was shot in her own home. They arrested the boyfriend. Like, how could that happen? I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, if Trayvon had shot the person who killed him, Trayvon would have been arrested right there on the scene. So why is it different standards and different policies on a universal level for African American people and people of color?
I'd love, Doc, you have a unique perspective because, athletes, Black athletes in this country are cherished and honored. And then they take off their uniform and they go in places and they can be treated like shit. That's the nicest word I can come from, but I'm sorry, but it is. It's just absurd. I'd love it if you'd share with us. And also, I know your father, I mentioned earlier, was a 30-year veteran from the Chicago Police Department. So yeah. I think you have both sides of it.
I tell our guys all the time, we live in a fake world. We live in an unreal world when we have our uniforms on. And then when we take them off, if we're not dressed right or if they don't recognize you, then we go back to being Black, to be honest. And so they do see both sides of it, Tony. And this whole thing for me as a coach of 15 Black men has been another teacher. I'm humbled, number one, to be on this panel. We have a mother of a slain son, a brother of a slain brother, and a son of a slain father. I keep hearing about this conversation that we should be having. And as a Black man, we've been having this conversation. We've been having this conversation for so long. And what we need is action. Well, we need to change habits. For me, we need education. I feel compassion for everybody. But when a Black boy goes to jail for a little bit of weed and he's in there for 10 years, they don't tell his story.
You know what, Tony? It's not that we smoked more weed than you did. We bought it from you. It's just that you had better lawyers. You knew who to call. You knew what to do. Just because your father smoked dope at 17 or 18 doesn't mean he ought to still be locked up at 40. In some of our states, the judge can get high, and we still haven't got the guys out of jail who went into jail for doing the same thing that we're now legalizing. Emptying out the jails that we have built for big business from nonviolent crimes sends our fathers back home to raise their sons. When white kids or white people, I'm not sure you can handle this, but when
white brother, give it to us.
When white people have a drug problem, it's considered a sickness. It's considered a sickness. When Black people get on drugs, we're criminals. When your kids get on drugs, they're patients. We love our kids like you love your kids. Our women want our men to come out of jail. Our little boys need their fathers back.
They don't say that this kid grew up in poverty, unequal education, and he was hopeless and joined the game because he saw no other hope. And to me, we have to do more than have a conversation. We need that. But we have to take action and we have to change habits, but we have to educate. And education is so important. We have to educate ourselves. And I'm not talking about school education. I'm talking about education on how we got here, because that's where you'll start having compassion. I've been asked, how do I educate myself? What should I need to do? And you go read, you go find, you go research. But for kids, we just have to educate them, because you're right. Racism is not an inborn act, it's taught, right? And so, and sometimes it's not even taught. It just happens because you're in a house of someone who doesn't know, a Black person, or doesn't know the history of this country. I really believe, like, if we teach more, we'll do more and understand. And I do think this is a call right now to do it, but we have to do this much longer than a protest. Everybody on this panel have seen protests in their lives, and we've seen little change, all right? So we have to get involved, and we have to stay involved. I think that's the key. But this is not a Black thing. This is a human thing. And so we have to have humanity. My dad was a good cop, and he always said, one thing that a good cop hates is a bad cop. Bad apple thing, that's true. We understand in society there are bad apples, but when bad apples happen, they have to be persecuted. My dad always said one thing, there'll be no victims in the Rivers house. He always said, but you are going to get victimized. And when that happens, you have to keep pushing, but you can't stop because then they win.
It's great to honor your father and all that he brought to you, because I also think that's where it all begins. It doesn't just begin in schools. It begins with fathers and mothers who step up and tell the truth about the diversity of life, the beauty of life. I mean, if you want to know what the universe or God loves, you go to the forest, and what do you see? Everything is different. Every twig, every tree, every branch, and that's the beauty. But somehow along the way, with tribalism and mentality, the mind gets in the way, and people are suspicious of what they don't understand and they don't have an experience of.
Oftentimes I want to operate out of my ego. I want to operate out of my hurt, my pain, but it's God's love for me that he forgives me every day, and I fall short every day. So with that being said, I try to operate out of that same love, and it's hard. It's extremely hard, especially when you're hurting, especially when your dad never recovers the same from that night. A lot of people don't know, but my dad was awarded with an amazing job that he was celebrating that night. A construction company. And so when he noticed the police were behind him, he ran for the same reason everybody else runs. And then he posed the question, and a lot of people say it was a statement, can we get along? It was actually a question. And he was asking America, can we get along? Can we stop making it hard? The part that bothers me the most is I want to dislike cops. However, I am blessed to have about 4 solid friends that are police officers. One of my grandfathers was a Los Angeles sheriff, and he's a great man. So I can't say all cops are bad, but I do have a hardening in my heart. I'll be completely honest with you. I have a hardening in my heart because there's no way that people's life should be taken for the color of their skin, and you haven't even gotten the chance to get to know these people. Like that, for me, that's sick. That's really sick. But however, we do serve a God that does serve justice, whether it's now, then, or whatever the case may be. That's the only thing that I have to hold on to. So I think we need just hold each other accountable, have uncomfortable conversations, have police relations, go out in the community, get to know these people, because you can't judge African-American men. And then people wonder why they have a chip on their shoulder. But I understand, as an African-American woman, I got to witness what my dad had to go through every day he walked out the door. And it's like, you know, you're on high alert, you're tense, you have an anxiety, and you're expected to have a smile. And it's like, that's a hard way to live as a Black man. That's hard.
I'd like to divide racism from injustice, because they're often used interchangeably, but they're really not the same thing. Racism is a condition of the heart. It deals with how you feel about me. Injustice is an action, it's how you act toward me. There's not going to be any legislation made that eradicates all types of biases and racism. What that is going to take is the love of God in our hearts and the experience of interacting with. That's the thing about racism. What brings us all around this table and what makes us all have so much fraternity around this table is injustice. When we talk about white privilege, a lot of white people get offended, but let's go back and understand that the Constitution describes us as being 3/5 human. So we have always had to fight for humanity. And let's be clear, Tony, we are not saying that all of our people are right or good, don't make mistakes, and don't need to be arrested. That's not true at all. We all know that's not true. What we are saying is we are people too, and we should not be tried and executed on the sidewalk. This is real for me. I grew up going to colored bathrooms and drinking from colored water fountains and watching my father go to the back door of restaurants to get something to eat. And if it had not been for Martin Luther King's father, my father would still be at the back door of restaurants trying to get something for his kids to eat that he had to eat in the car. My great-grandmother was a slave. She died when I was 10 years old with a brand on her back. Our history is not so long ago. It was just yesterday. And the ramifications of the kind of abuse that has been infused upon us against our will has left a lot of terrible side effects on us as individuals, of which whites can be inconsiderate and quite judgmental. And I think to give yourself a pass to say, I could never know what it is like to be a Black man, and I could never know what it's like to be to have come from your background and have your set of experiences is absolutely true, but it does not give you an excuse. You don't have to be a dog to put a football player in jail for abusing a dog. We cannot give ourselves these sociological passes about this level of pain. This is not new. It shouldn't take us 200 and some years to learn this lesson. But when you write the books you read, you come up with skewed truth. And you can't imagine how my eyes fill with tears to see young and old white men and women standing out there with us to admit that our lives matter. If you want to do something better than that, stop funding the campaigns of people who think it's okay to kill me. Hold them accountable. While I am trying to get our people to vote, we need voices like yours to get your people to hold those people accountable to a higher standard that stops the pain. The war on crime was really code for war on us. Both Democrats and Republicans have participated in it. And just because it's your party doesn't mean you don't need to correct it.
I went through and made a list of just the last 10 years. And then I looked back and said, let's go through the last 4 presidents. And, you know, there's 2 of those administrations were Democrats, 2 were Republicans. And we've seen this continue to happen no matter who's in charge. So I really believe it's up to us. We are better than this. And we've got to take this momentum and not let it die. What do we do to make sure this momentum does not stop? And once and for all, we finally produce lasting change?
We need to listen to all types of news, not just the news that reinforces what we believe. We need to watch other kind of movies. We need to read each other's books. We need to be the family God created us to be. There is no way, I'll say this and shut up, there is no way in God's green earth that I could see Tony Robbins on the side of the road and put my knee in his neck, or let anybody else do that, and me not fight them to the death. As white as you are and as Black as I am, I would go down to the floor fighting for you.
As I would for you, brother. As you know in your soul, as I would for you.
Everything where the floor was level and the rules were clear, Black people excelled at it. Basketball, the floor was level and the rules were clear, we did good. Football, the floor was level and the rules were clear, we did good. Everywhere the floor is level and the rules are clear, we do good. Give us a chance. Our little kids became everything they were exposed to. So they can do hip hop, they can do music, they can do recording, they can play basketball, they can play football, they can run, and now they're starting to golf because if we can see it, we can be it, and they can preach. Now, a few of us escape, but you can't point at the few and say, look at so-and-so and look at so-and-so and look at Oprah Winfrey and look at T.D. Jakes and look at so. Don't look at me because I didn't have a record. I had never been locked up by the grace of God. I had a little bit more of a level floor. It's not just about being Black. It's about the inequities of the floor. We start with health disparities, food deserts, all of these problems. I know it's overwhelming. We don't want you to fix it for us. We want you to fix it with us. I'll stop with that. Thank you.
Preach, brother. Let's talk about solutions that seem impossible.
Long story short, I traveled the country and I interviewed a lot of Klan members, leaders, Imperial Wizards, Grand Dragons, Exalted Cyclopses, Great Titans, so forth and so on. And I wrote the book, Clandestine Relationships. And through the process of sitting down and talking with these people, many of them ended up leaving the Klan and giving me their robes and hoods. It starts with dialogue.
I got to ask, when you ask them the question, how can you hate me without knowing me? What were their answers? And then how do you get through?
Let me tell you the
like
answers,
that?
okay? I got two answers. Because I would ask the question when I first started interviewing the people. All right. The answer I would get is, Black people are criminals. Then I'm told also that Black people are lazy. And then I'm told that Black people are born with a smaller brain than white people. So we don't have the capacity of a white brain to have the higher IQs. That's why we score so low on the SATs. Now listen, when somebody tells you that, and you're sitting there and they're telling you this, is what you're hearing offensive? Absolutely, it's offensive. Was I offended? Absolutely not. And why was I not offended by that? Because it did not apply to me. All right, how could I let this man who just met me 5-10 minutes ago, and all he sees is this, the color of my skin, make that assumption about me? Why should I be offended by a lie? You got to know who you are. You have that confidence in knowing who you are and not let somebody else define who you are. You have to have that your own self-esteem. All right, so that way it doesn't bother you. Ignorance breeds fear. We fear those things we don't understand. If you do not keep that fear in check, that fear will escalate and breed hatred, because we hate the things that frighten us. If you don't keep that hatred in check, that hatred will escalate and breed destruction. We want to destroy the things that we hate. Why? Because they frighten us. But guess what? They may have been harmless and we were just ignorant.
You shared a story about a Cyclops, and I think it's really instructive about what he believed about, you have a in your DNA as built-in violence.
You want to hear that?
Would you share that? Because I love it. It's instructive of how you're able to break through. You gave kind of how you broke through his psychology. Would you share that briefly?
Sure. I mean, the key to my success in doing this is, even though the headlines will say Black musician converts 50 Klan members, 200 Klan members, or whatever they say, no, I did not convert those people. All right? I am the impetus for over 200 white supremacists getting out of those organizations. But what I do is I plant a seed and I nourish that seed and they end up converting themselves.
Yes.
So I was in my car and I had an Exalted Cyclops riding in my car beside me. We're talking, and we're just driving along, and we're in the Washington, D.C. area. and he made the statement, which I've heard 1,000 times, that Black people have a gene within them. We're born with this gene that makes us violent. And so I said, well, how do you figure that? He says, well, look, who's doing all the drive-bys and carjackings in Southeast? He's referring to Southeast Washington, D.C., which is predominantly Black. Okay, it's Black people. I said, but you're not considering the demographics. That's what lives there. He goes, no, that has nothing to do with it. You all have that gene. And I said, listen, let me tell you something. I said, I'm as Black as anybody you've ever seen. I said, I have never done a drive-by. I have never done a carjacking. How do you explain that? He didn't even think about it for 1 second. He answered me like that. He said, your gene is latent, hasn't come out yet. I was dumbfounded. I was speechless. How do you argue with somebody like that? He's so far out, you can't even bite into that. And so he's sitting there all smug, like, you see, you got nothing to say. So I thought about it, and I said, well, all white people have a gene within them that makes them a serial killer. And he says, well, wow, how do you figure? I said, name me 3 Black serial killers. He couldn't do it. I said, I'm going to give you one. I named one for him. I said, now, just name me 2. All I want is 2. He couldn't do it. I said, Charles Manson, Jeffrey Dahmer, Henry Lee Lucas, John Wayne Gacy, Albert DeSalvo, the Boston Strangler, Ted Bundy, David Berkowitz, son of Sam, on and on. I said, son, they're all white. You're a serial killer. He said, Daryl, I've never killed anybody. I said, your gene is latent, hasn't come out yet. He goes, well, that's stupid. I said, well, duh. Okay, Scott Shepherd was a Klansman at one time. He's from Indianola, Mississippi, the home of the White Citizens Council, which is the executive branch of the KKK. They're the white collar executives who do all the stuff, and then the Klan goes out and does all the night riding and stuff. But Scott Shepherd comes from there. He joined the Klan, and he rose to the rank of Grand Dragon in one Klan group, Grand Dragon for Mississippi and the state. And then he joined another Klan group later and rose to the rank of Imperial Wizard, National Klan leader. So I own Scott Shepherd's robe as well. And Scott Shepherd is not only a very good friend of mine, he is my brother, Scott Shepherd.
Klansman for Mississippi!
Mississippi!
Klansman for America!
For America!
Like he said, I was born in Indianola, Mississippi, and I was born in a family that was a very violent alcoholic father. And there was a lot of things that I saw when I was growing up. During this time, I didn't have any self-esteem. I was embarrassed. I didn't have any self-esteem. I was angry, full of anger, and I was looking for a place to fit in. And I just happened to see Daryl Davis on Discovery Channel, and when he was on TV, he made a lot of sense to me.
What did he say that made sense to you initially, that grabbed you?
Well, basically, one of the things he said, of course, what he says is, how can you hate me if you don't know me? I turned around, I asked myself that question. I didn't have an answer. I've learned a lot from Daryl, and the main thing is conversation. Conversation is what really is the key to this whole situation.
It's important for us to remember that human beings can truly change, because today most of the conversations are making moral judgments about somebody and then locking them in time.
Could I say one thing? Let me say one thing. I'd like to apologize to Mr. Martin Luther King III there. I'd like to apologize to everyone on the panel, because I'm grateful, very grateful that I'm not the same person I am today that I was then. It's been a good God bless.
I saw a little poster that I thought, I've sent it to people that have these conversations that I'll throw up on the screen, but I'd like each of you to share, what's the problem with all lives matter? I think I understand, but I want to hear from your voices. What does Black lives really matter? What's the essence of it? And throw that on the screen, this beautiful little girl holding up this poster. And what it says here, if you guys can see it, is it says, we said Black lives matter. Never said only Black lives matter. We know all lives matter. We just need your help. With the Black Lives Matter for Black lives are in danger. I mean, in one poster, this little girl, I think, just put it so clear because it answers the question a lot of them. But I'd like you, anyone want to address this, please address this, because I want to take away this illusion that some people seem to have that black people are saying we're the only ones that matter, which is the most absurd thing I could possibly hear, but people believe it. And I have to remind myself, they know not what they do, right? You know, it's like, based on their upbringing, based on their beliefs, based on their conditioning, they couldn't believe anything else in this moment, but they could believe something new if we can create an opening. That's what this set of conversations has been about. We'd like to hear your view of, Black Lives Matter and what it's really about, so that people that are not within the movement maybe have a deeper perspective of what its message is. I hope this conversation as a whole has already answered it, but I think we should answer it specifically.
I think that when we hear Black Lives Matter, if people can understand, it is saying Black Lives Matter too. So if individuals can think also, then they won't be up in arms and have to rush really fast to say all lives matter. We know all lives matter, but historically, our lives haven't mattered.
So it depends on what news channel you watch, what Black Lives Matter means to you. It's often has a lot to do with who said it to you first and how, in what context they taught it to you. So break away from your first teacher and your first experience and rethink that Black lives do matter and white lives do matter and young lives do matter and old lives do matter. And let's name it each time that it's threatened, rather than to throw it all into the soup and act like all lives are being threatened simultaneously. 2 years from now, we might be talking about all lives matter. It's whoever is up under attack at that moment. And right now, amongst other people groups, Black lives are largely under attack. And so that's where our focus is today.
Civil rights law, I've represented dozens and dozens of families of Black and brown people who have been killed by the people who are supposed to protect and serve them. And what we have encountered in America, and this is just a reality, that there seems to be two justice systems in America. One for Black America and one for white America, when the goal should be equal justice for the United States of America. I challenge anybody to say, that's not worth fighting for. I challenge anybody to say, that's not what makes America great. I challenge anybody to say, that's not what makes America the great beacon of hope and justice for all of the world to marvel.
Let's finish with what actions. Shelby, you've mentioned some already, but what do you hope will come out of this conversation? Someone is watching this conversation, and by the way, hopefully those that are of brown skin, those that are part of the LGBT community, those that experienced any form of racism or any form of oppression, understand this conversation was for them as well. But this one is about the African-American experience primarily here because of what's happening right now. But we're really just talking about humanity here. But what are the actions that we could take or someone at home should take, or you'd want them to take, so that this 3 hours actually led to something? I mean, education and compassion certainly is a first step because it changes relationships. You've all experienced that. Daryl's demonstrated that. But what will you give us one or two things you'd like to see happen that you think could either change the systemic problems or that just an individual can be part of the solution as we wrap up here?
Okay, I'll say two things. One, our country can only become one of two things. It can become, number one, that which we sit back and let it become, or it can become, number two, that which we stand up and make it become. So we have to ask ourselves the question, do I want to sit back and see what my country becomes, or do I want to stand up and make my country become what I want to see?
I think it's important that we don't give people a blueprint how to be out of their comfort zone. And so my advice to people who are really interested in becoming more adaptable, because that's really what it's requiring, that you come out of the safety of your silo, your tribe, and your bubble, and integrate, which is frightening. It's really frightening, especially when you're not used to it. This is my advice to you. Find things that we have in common to connect with. There are always distinctives, and the media focuses on our distinctives because divisions drive up ratings. And instead of allowing the media to shape your perception of me, find things that are common to us and start your relationship like that. Because if healing and love and all the things we're talking about are going to occur, they're going to occur amongst friends. And I don't think people always know how to befriend somebody whose background is different, but there's always something common. This is old school, and I'm going to date myself with this, but we were taught in school that in order to work with fractions or multiply them or divide them, you had to reduce them to their lowest common denominator. I don't think they do that anymore, but that's the way they taught us.
I remember.
Do you remember that? Reduce it down to your lowest common denominator. You love your kids. I love my kids. You like to eat, I like to eat. You like music, I like music. Let's start with what we like. And if we can connect over what we like, then gradually we can discuss things that we think that we don't like. And I want to encourage everybody to lose the fear of getting outside of the orbit of what is comfortable to you, and to start a conversation by looking for things that are common to men.
I love you talking about bridging and finding with that basic common denominator, because that's what I attempt to do myself. And I think it's the greatest compliment in the world that we find the depth of love for our children, for our family, for society, for our desire to do something meaningful with our lives that is inside of every one of us. Every one of us needs to feel like we're important, that our life is meaningful, like we're loved, and that we can love, and that we can have some certainty that we can have more pleasure than pain in our life, more comfort at least than pain, because pain's going to come for all of us. The one common denominator is extreme stress. We're all going to experience those extreme moments, and all of you, just because of the color of your skin, have had those experiences, and then life gives them to us in many other ways. We're all going to lose a loved one. We're all going to be in a place where maybe our house burns down and we lose our job, or the government changes the rules and suddenly, your business is gone. We're all going to face those things. Some people are going to be raped. It's horrific challenges that are there. But what makes us human, I believe, is our capacity to be resilient through all that and to grow spiritually, so that our compassion, our heart and soul grows, and we connect and unify more. And in that we feel the love and joy. I mean, separation is suffering.
I want to maybe perhaps encourage an assignment.
Great.
Many people believe they know who Martin Luther King Jr. was and what his vision was for our nation and world. But to truly understand my dad, then you need to read the book that I started off talking about, Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community, where he talks about the world house, the world in which we must engage and live in, because it gives us pragmatic and practical ways to create this world and really the beloved community. If we had the essence of that, Dr. Beckwith, Bishop Jakes, and so many other leaders preach about this love, this universal love that we as a nation and as a world must engage in and can. It is demonstrated every day. But it's even bigger than that. It's even bigger than that, because you see, humankind has a capacity that other animal forms don't have. All we got to do is to tune into that internal part of who we are, because we've been made in the image of, but we are incredible human. I mean, think about when there's a tornado, a tsunami, a hurricane, people, Americans, roll up their sleeves and they come to give. They give the best. They don't ask you what color you are. They don't ask you what your sexual orientation is. They don't want to know anything. They just want to help you get out of that condition. We are a phenomenal and amazing society. We got to find a way to constantly bring that good out of us. And it all revolves, I would say, around love. So yes, we must pray for change. We must work for change. We must be the change. And yet, if love is not yet won, the battle is not yet over.
I agree, my brothers. I cannot thank you all enough. I know I've said this so many times, but I love you all. I love your souls. We are in a moment in history in which a change can be made, and you've all spent your lives to get to that point, and you've all suffered immensely. But again, out of suffering, some good must come, and out of your suffering, I promise you I'll do everything in my power to get this out to as many people, as well as be, a heartfelt example of that myself. So I
just want to say, I don't want to presume to speak for this group, particularly this group, is extremely articulate and intelligent as they are. But I think it would be remiss of us not to personally thank you as being a catalyst that brought us all together to have the kinds of conversations that would feed the nation. You have to be a very broad and bright and progressive person to have the capacity of love to throw your arms out in the middle of such turbulent times and bring us together. And I don't want you to be the one who thanks us without knowing how deeply and how sincerely we thank you for being just who you are.
Well, it's my honor.
I was going to say the same thing, Bishop. As I saw the video that you put out, Tony, and your emotions were very, very raw, very sincere, very heartfelt in what you were feeling during this time. It really moved me. I think the last couple of weeks, I probably cried more in the last 2 weeks than I've cried in a couple of years. And to feel you resonate with the pain that all of us are going through really touched me at a very deep level. So along with the bishop and everyone else, I also want to thank you for being the place through which this galvanized into this conversation that will be moved to more love and more action. Thank you.
Love you all. Thank you. It's my honor. You're all humans of such incredible goodness. And I know it'll inspire people to find the goodness that's already alive inside them and maybe wake it up even a bit more. God bless you all. I look forward to seeing you sometime soon.